IVM.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we share the journey of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners.
Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode on the Musafir Stories. Before we begin with today's episode, a quick shout out to Siraj, one of our listeners who took time to write to us. Thank you so much, buddy. As for today's episode, we talked to two very dear guests about a place that has always been a talking point for one reason or the other. Some of the language on today's podcast can be deemed explicit in nature, so listener discretion is advised. Let's jump onto the episode and find out more. So with that introduction, I'd love to welcome Pournima and Tarun to the Musafir Stories. Guys, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast and welcome.
Hey guys, welcome to the Musafir Stories.
Hi Saif, hi Faiza.
Hi.
First of all, we would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity. We have always been a great fan of Musafir Stories. You guys are doing really great work, and you have given us so many travel inspirations. Last year I visited Mandu just because I listened to a podcast and I felt that it is a very interesting place to visit. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my God, thank
very,
you.
very
Yeah.
grateful to you, Tarun and Pournima, for first of all reaching out to you. So yeah, to the listeners, a little bit of a background that Tarun and Pournima are one of the winners of Get Featured on the Musafir Stories contest. So we just wanted to throw it out there that you, if you're a listener, you also can be on the podcast. You just have to pitch to us, write to us about a place you traveled and you'd like to share with the rest of the listeners. And if all works out, like Tarun and Pournima, even you guys can be on the podcast. So thank you so much, guys, Tarun and Pournima, and thank you for listening in the first place. It's we are really grateful to have listeners like you. But now that you've given a little bit of a background, why don't you also speak about where you're based and what you guys do?
I am from Maharashtra. Gondia is a district in Maharashtra. It is a small town. I live there. But right now I'm studying MBBS in Government Medical College Nagpur, which is situated in Nagpur. And we are in second year preparing for exams. Next month we are going to face our exams.
Oh my God.
Okay, and Pournima, yeah.
I'm Pournima Kolle and I'm also from Maharashtra. I'm from Buldhana and currently I live in Nagpur in the same college as Tarun's, Government Medical College Nagpur.
Okay, so
Nice,
we
you're
know
like the future
doctors.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get some discount, Faiza, whenever we have to go see the doctors. I hope we don't have to go soon, but yeah.
We get a lot to listen this.
Yeah, I'm always pulling the leg of my other doctor friends that whenever they start their practice, they have to give us discounts. And saying
I
that
hope
at the same
you
time,
guys better remember us, yeah.
Yeah, we are trying to become doctors by our profession, but at heart we are travelers.
Travelers, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's great to hear. Now, why don't you and Pournima share with our fellow listeners where you're taking us and our listeners today?
So today we are going to talk about the UNESCO World Heritage Site known for its bold, erotic and incredibly stunning sculptures, the Khajuraho, the temples of Khajuraho, which is situated in Madhya Pradesh, the heart of India.
Brilliant. And yeah, I think it's really, really one of the important and unique monuments, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, as you mentioned, in India and situated in Madhya Pradesh. And we were really excited to hear about this as well because there's a lot of misconception and just a kind of a stigma about the place, right? Just because of the sculptures, like the erotic sculptures, like you said, right? So there's a lot of stigma and misconception around this as well. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to listen from you about your experience and also perhaps shed some light on the history and the background of this place as well, as to what the importance of these were and what the backstory of these sculptures is. So let's jump into the episode and talk a little bit more about it. Faiza wants to add something.
Yeah, so Tarun, how many days of an itinerary do you think it is to cover all the temples there?
I think a 2-day itinerary is sufficient actually, but we spent 3 days there. Anywhere around 2-3 days is sufficient to explore Khajuraho and all the monuments.
Okay, and even with respect to the stay and accommodation, is it quite easy to get them booked online?
Yeah, it's very easy. There are a lot of options for budget travelers and those who are looking for luxury stay. We stayed at Yogi Ashram Guest House. Yogi Ashram Guest House, it is a bit far away, around 2 kilometers from the hustle bustle of the western group of temples from the town.
Mm-hmm.
So it is quite little place.
It is like an ideal place for backpackers who seek like solace and calmity.
Yeah.
So it is like those people don't have televisions, and also according to them, it is like that you should maintain silence and peace in that particular region, and like it is to feel the inner peace within you.
Also, there are budget options like Zostel and Moustache
Okay.
hostels.
Okay.
And if somebody is looking for a luxury kind of stay, they can stay at the Lalit, and there is also Ramada. So there are plenty of options to stay.
Okay,
Wonderful.
brilliant.
Good.
So that's not an issue.
Yeah.
And how about getting to Khajuraho? How did you guys get there?
So we took a bus from Nagpur, which directly went to Khajuraho. So it was a quite convenient journey for both of us.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, and it is pretty much accessible to from the rest of the country. You can go there by air. There is a domestic airport in Khajuraho, operating flights from Delhi, Varanasi, Agra, Mumbai, and by train it is also connected to Jhansi. And regular bus services are available from the nearby town like Chhatarpur. It is situated in Chhatarpur district in Madhya Pradesh. Jhansi, Varanasi, Bhopal, many towns, nearby towns.
Great. So this part is perfectly fine, and you guys have I think pretty much everybody who's listening are pretty sorted about how they need to go and the booking options. So thank you guys for filling us in on this.
Yeah. Now, also tell me a little bit about.
I think what time of the year? Yeah, what time of the year is it best to travel there, and does it become too hot during summers? And when did you guys travel?
Yeah. Because it is situated in central India, it tends to get hot in summers. We visited in November. So I think from November to March, it's a good time to visit. Also, you can visit in rainy season in monsoons. It can be a little problematic, but it's okay. It never rains all day. So.
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
Sounds
brilliant.
perfect, yeah.
And I think you guys have set up the context really well in terms of getting there and the location of the place and living there, all of that. So thank you so much for that. Now let's get into the meat of things and talk a little bit more about the Khajuraho temples in themselves, right? Given how unique they are. What was the motivation for you guys to go to Khajuraho?
It is actually, we were all... always fascinated about the temples because we have read about it earlier that its architecture, it's very different, like it's the sculptures are bold, erotic, so we really wanted to see that. And it was always in my mind that how come today we see that it's a taboo to talk about sex and about all these stuff. It was always in our mind that how come this sexually liberating work of art was created in India back then, while in contemporary world today, even in most of the Indians consider even talking about sex in public as taboo. It was always in our mind, so we visited there.
Also, it was a perfect weekend getaway for us, as it was like closer to us, and it was a budget trip. It can be a budget trip within 5,000.
We both did this trip in around 5,000 rupees.
Wow,
okay, that's brilliant.
Yeah, and more motivation to go there.
More motivation, and I think it's also a great point to for students to listen. Right, it's not that it's a elaborate, expensive trip that you have to plan. You can actually plan this on a shoestring. So, and now just getting into the specifics of your trip, right? You said it was about a 3-day trip. So, run us through the whole itinerary, right? Start with day one and tell us what you guys did once you got there.
So when we reached on the first day, actually it was a bit tiring journey, so we relaxed most of the day. And at the evening we went to Matangeshwara temple. So Matangeshwara temple is the only live temple, living temple in the Khajuraho. It is used for worship by the locals. So there is Matangeshwara Mahadev, The Shivalinga in that temple is around 2.5 feet tall. So this was our first day plan. We visited Matangeshwara temple. Then we had a meal at Raja's Cafe. It is a very famous cafe in the...
From there, you can also have a great view of the temples.
Okay.
It is a good place, and we recommend even if you are on a budget trip, you should go there at least once. They offer like great wood fire pizza, and like it is a good place.
Okay,
Nice.
brilliant. So first day was mostly relaxing a little bit, but you also went ahead and visited one of the living temples. You said that's one of the functional temples, Matangeshwara temple, and the Shiva temple. I understand, right? So that's great.
Pournima, and how easy it is to get around the place? Like, is transport easily available?
Yeah, I mean, both of us are like we chose a bicycle to get around. Like it was pretty easy. Like the roads are good. Like you can ride a bicycle through the village and all to get to the southern and eastern group of temples. The bicycle, according to me, is the best way to get around.
Right. Definitely. And much different also when I hear of it. Bicycle, because, I mean, it's nice, it's healthy, eco-friendly, and it's not too much of a dig in a person's pocket. So, wow, wonderful, guys.
Yeah, this pretty much sums up our first day. On the second day, we actually explored these western group of temples and other group of temples which are scattered all over the village.
Okay, and then just to call this out, right? So the temples are split up into the western group of temples and the eastern group of temples. Is that how it is?
So the deal is the western group of temples. It is a closed enclosure. So the most maintained temples are in the western group. You have to get a ticket to visit this enclosure. And the same ticket can be used for an archaeological museum which is nearby to the western group of temples. On the eastern side of the village, there are Jain enclosure. So the basically Khajuraho temples were Shiva temple, Vishnu temples, and Jain temples. So the Jain people have enclosed their temples into Jain enclosure. So you can visit there also.
Okay, I think that's also very interesting, and it's also very unique, right? Because a lot of us just thought of it as those temples, perhaps the ones you're referring in the western group of temples, right? Which had like a lot of these bold sculptures, but looks like there's also other temples, and more surprisingly, there's also like Jain temples, like you mentioned. So that's quite a finding for me. So yeah, go on.
So the most of the bold structures and erotic sculptures are on western group of temples. The Jain enclosure does not have much sexual sculptures on them. Okay, and other eastern group of temples are Jawari temple, Brahma temple. There is also Vamana temple. Vamana is fifth incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Okay. So that temple is dedicated to him. There is southern group of temples. There is Chaturbhuj temple and Dulhadev temple. So the deal with Chaturbhuj temple is that it is the only temple which is facing to the west. And all the other temples in Khajuraho, they are facing east. And at the time these temples were created, there were 85 temples. Now around 20 to 25 are still remaining.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a interesting tidbit as well, and a good segue also to just quickly call out the history and the time in which these temples were built, right? Like Tarun pointed out at the beginning as well, these are in the Bundelkhand region, basically. That's what the region was called, and built by the Chandela Rajas, right? That was the dynasty which commissioned to build these temples, and they were built, I understand, between the 10th and 11th century AD, right? That's when these were...
So they were built between 10th to 11th centuries by the Chandela kings. It was also the time when they were on their prime.
Okay.
And Chandela kings were always a great patron of art and architecture. So they have built these huge, humongous and so beautiful temples as we can see still today. So these temples were hidden for a long time from the common civilization after the decline of Chandela kings in 13th century.
Right, and apparently this was the Delhi Sultanate, right? When those guys started to attack, perhaps after the 13th century, that's when even the Chandela... gone.
Mahmud of Ghazni, he used to attack frequently in the Bundelkhand region. So the King Vidyadhar shifted his capital from Khajuraho to Mahoba. So this pretty much then these temples were neglected the Chandela dynasty weekend, and these temples there was a lot of vegetation around these temples, so this was hidden from the public eye. Going by the history and the folklores about these temples, there is an interesting legend about the origin of Chandela kings, which I would like to tell you.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, please.
It is said that once there was a beautiful girl named Hemvati. So any legend starts with a beautiful girl. So this case is also here. It is said that she was daughter of a priest of Gaharwar kings of Banaras.
Okay.
So once Hemvati was bathing in a pond, and the moon god Chandra saw her and made love to her.
Oh.
So Hemvati was worried about the dishonor of being a unwed mother. But Chandra assured her that their son would become a great king. So this child was called as Chandravarman, and he is believed to be the founder of Chandela dynasty.
Oh, wow.
Oh my god, that's an interesting story.
Yeah. I don't think we came across this. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, very interesting legends, right? I mean, that's another bit of travel, right? That's so exciting that when you travel, it's not just about like getting from point A to point B and looking at those places. It's also like digging a little bit into the history of the place, the legends associated to the place, and I think that's what makes it so much more interesting and so much more romantic also in one way. It's a lot of these things that the legends and a lot of the stories from fables or folklore that you hear that become common and get passed on through oral history or written history, whatever it is. But it's a great thing, and really glad to find out about this. Now, you said there is a ticket to get to these temples, right? That's what you said.
Yeah, for the Western group.
And how much would one be one be paying for these tickets?
I think for the Indians it was around 40 to 45. I don't remember exactly how much it costed.
Okay, it's not too much as well. And yeah, just going back to the historical timing of this, right? We were just touching upon that. I think it was much later in the 18th century that these temples were actually discovered, right? One of the British surveyors.
Yeah, it was discovered in 18th century by British engineer T.S. Burt. It is said that the shepherds who were grazing their cattle around, they discovered that there is something grand in these vegetations, so they informed the British officials, and then they sent engineers, and it is said that he rediscovered all these temples.
Very interesting. So yeah, now we're eager to, having found out about the backstory of these temples and the history behind them, we're eager to find out a little bit more about your experience going there, and tell us about the things you saw there and the stories you heard while visiting there.
So basically, in the western group of temples, there are like Lakshmana, Kandariya Mahadev, Vishwanath Temple, Jagdambi Temple, Chitragupt Temple, and smaller shrines of Varaha and Nandi.
Okay.
So the main thing to do here is to see the architecture and to understand the sculptures which are carved out there. Okay.
So after taking the ticket, we were looking for some guide, because I think if you visit these historical places, a guide is necessary, kind of, because you can you get to know about the history and all these things.
Absolutely.
And the local folklores about them. But we were low in budget, so we what we did that we asked a Canadian group of people. They were very friendly. So we asked them if we can listen to their guide together, being with them together. So they readily agreed to it. So it was really thankful of them.
Ah, that's sweet of them.
That's brilliant. And yeah, like you said, it's absolutely very, very useful if you're using a guide while visiting, especially places that have like so much historical significance, and there's a lot of stories hidden behind these that one might miss out on if you don't avail the services of a guide. So yeah, tell us about your experience going on this little tour with that guide.
Basically, the guide took us through the spiritual pathway to explain these temples to us.
Okay.
So he started with the thing that there are 4 aspects to human life. Moksha, Kama, Dharma and Artha. So these are elaborated on the temple walls by the sculptures. So the main thing here is the architecture here, which is the Nagara style of architecture.
Right.
So the basic framework of all the temples is almost the same. It consists of a Ardha Mandapa, which is the entrance court.
Right.
Then there's Mandapa, which is the hall. Then there's Mahamandap, which is the Great Hall. Then there's Antral, which is the space between the Mahamandap and the Garbhagriha. So the Garbhagriha is where the idol of the deity is kept.
Right, that's the main part of the temple, right? The sanctum sanctorum, as you call it.
Yeah.
So this is the architectural aspect of it. So if we throw more light on the historical aspect of it, that who made these temples, which king were involved in making of these temples. As the history goes, these Chandela kings, most notably the King Yashovarman. King Yashovarman built the Lakshmana temple.
Okay.
King Thangadev, who built the Vishwanatha temple. And there is the King Vidyadhar, who fought with Mahmud of Ghazni when he attacked their state. So King Vidyadhar, he fought the war and succeeded. To celebrate this, he built the Kandariya Mahadev temple, which is the biggest, largest temple in the Khajuraho, and architectural wise, it is also the best temple.
Okay, brilliant. I think that's some great historical tidbits you have given, both about the architectural style, which you said is the Nagara style, right? Basically, most North Indian temples are in this style, the Nagara style of architecture, compared to the South Indian temples, which is more in the Dravidian style of architecture. So that's the significance, and thank you for calling out the different parts of the temple also. I think that's very useful.
Yeah. So firstly, we'll speak about what he told us about the spiritual aspect, and then we will highlight the specific points about the temples. So just like Pournima said, he told us that in Hinduism there are 4 objects of human pursuit, which was also called as Purusharthas. That Dharma, the moral values; Artha, that is economic values; Kama, that is pleasure values, which is mostly depicted on the temple; and the Moksha, the salvation. So moksha, which is the ultimate human ideal, which brings human close to the god, can't be attained unless he has seeked other purusharthas. It is said in Hinduism. So the sculptures on the temples symbolize the attainment of dharma, artha and kama. So when a person enters the temple, he pursues moksha. So he told us this about the spiritual aspect of the temple. So just like I told you, that there was a question in my mind that how come these was so liberating in this so liberating form of art was existing back then while we still don't talk about it.
Right.
So he answered it very beautifully. I would like to share it with you and listeners. So he told us that because we, the Indians now in the contemporary world, are concerned only about the pleasurable aspect of sex. Better say we do not have any knowledge left about the spiritual aspect of it. We are ruled by Britishers and other rulers before that for the centuries. So he told us that a slavery and dependency of the centuries we have made us devoid of happiness. So we seek it in these pleasure in sex and material aspects of it. So the knowledge of our ancient time is long forgotten. We have become very much curious about sex, but in regressive fashion. So when you're curious for materialistic things, it is lust, and lust is definitely a taboo. So this pretty much simplifies how now we are not talking about it, but it was pretty much cool back then.
So I would like to add one thing to this, that most people associate these temples only with the sexual aspects of it, but they know little about the other aspects.
Okay.
So I would like to tell that the erotic sculptures constitute only 10% of the total carvings.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. Okay.
Much of the people think that it is the only thing that is depicted there. Also, generally, people confuse being religious with being spiritual, although they are completely different things. So, if we take for an example, in religion, we consider sex to be an intercourse and sex to be an intimate thing. But if we look to the spiritual context of it, it is seen as an exchange of energy. When we mix physical pleasure with spiritual pursuits, it becomes a journey to spiritualism.
I think that's a great way and an eye-opening way of looking at it, right? It's not something as a taboo to be considered as a taboo or a thing to be played down upon. I think it's a great explanation that you've gotten. So yeah, thank you for that. And talk to us a little bit more about your experience. And this is you started off with what was the name of the temple? Can you remind me, Tarun, that you started off with?
Lakshmana temple we'll start with Lakshmana temple.
Lakshmana temple.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and take it up from there.
Okay, most of the things are common in all the temples, but we will specifically talk about Lakshmana temple and Kandarya Mahadev temple.
Okay, go on.
So, when you see these temples, you will see the figures, the sculptures of the Hindu deities, which are really different from what we perceive them now. The idol of Ganpati, if you look at the idol of Lord Ganpati, you will see that it is very different from what we worship in our daily routines and all.
When you say different, what do you mean?
The physical form of them. I mean, he is elephant-headed god, but the postures he is standing in and the
Okay.
Interesting.
And most of the deities which we know, we do not worship now, like Brahma. Like there is no temple in India except Pushkar for the Brahma, Lord Brahma. There is depiction of Lord Brahma and his sculptures on the temple wall. So it shows that in ancient time maybe Lord Brahma and his worship was more common than now.
Yeah.
There is also temple of Lord Vamana, which is fifth reincarnation of Vishnu. So this tells us that the perspective about the Indian gods, Hindu gods, was little bit different from what we have right now. And the second point I would like to emphasize on that when most of the temples have smaller shrines around them. The Lakshmana temple have the smaller shrines around it maintained. There are 4 smaller shrines on the 4 corners of the Lakshmana temple. So these the 4 smaller shrines and the main temple, these together symbolizes the Panchatattva, the 5 elements of life: earth, water, air, sky, all these 5 elements. Every temple had these smaller shrines, but most of the smaller shrines are not in good condition now, or they are destroyed. There is Varaha shrine, and there is a Varaha shrine in front of the Lakshmana temple. So the Varaha was first incarnation of Vishnu. So there is a mythological story behind it. There was a demon who was trying to drown the earth in Bhavasagar. So Lord Vishnu took an incarnation in the form of half human and half swine. So swine means Varaha, and he saved the earth from drowning. So this is the importance of the Varaha shrine.
Okay. Yeah,
it's interesting history also, yeah.
The Lakshmana temple is dedicated to Lord Vishnu, and as we know, goddess Lakshmi is a wife of Lord Vishnu. So there were smaller shrines of Lakshmi in front of the Lakshmana temple. Similarly, there is Vishwanatha temple, which is dedicated to Lord Shiva. So there is a Nandi shrine. Nandi means the bull. He used to ride it.
Right.
It is said that Nandi was the ride for the Shiva, Lord Shiva. So there is a smaller Nandi shrine in front of Vishwanatha temple.
Very interesting. And yeah, thank you for linking it up well also, because otherwise for somebody who doesn't have a background, it's just another temple and we might not understand the subtle differences between the temples, right? So thank you so much for calling out the specifics of these temples also. But yeah, go on Tarun.
So there is also an interesting aspect about how these temples were stuck together. Today we use cement for connecting the building blocks and build that
bricks and all that. Yeah.
But at that time, the cementing material was not used. The rocks were carved and they were interlocked using the aluminium without any cementing material. So this is also a great thing they used to do in past.
Right, and I think they were pretty innovative as well because with limited resources, they've done wonders that are still standing,
exactly.
And we all are mesmerized by them.
So even back then, they in the architecture of the temples, they had a Greek influence to it. They have these Shardul, which means a mighty tiger, which represents this prosperity and strength. Also, there's Vyal, which is a kind of a mythological mutant animal. You can see bodies of a different animal and there's head of a different animal. So
the Sardula statue, there are around 3-4 Sardula statues all over the western group of temples. One which should take the notice is situated between Jagdambi temple and the Kandarya Mahadev temple. The Jagdambi and Kandarya Mahadev temple are on the same platform. So there is a Sadhula statue between, which everybody should notice and see it. And the Vyala, regarding Vyalas, Vyal are depicted on the walls. Together with other structures, Vyals are depicted on the walls.
Okay, very interesting, and it's also quite, like I said before, too eye-opening to see that there's so much more, because the only thing we hear as feedback from people who have gone there is, oh, the bold sculptures, the erotic sculptures, it's about them. But by the sounds of it, by the sounds of your experience exploring the temple, it looks like there's so much more just
yeah.
beyond this, and even the subtle differences about the Shaivite or the Shiva temples versus the Vishnu temples, and like you mentioned earlier, even Jain temples. So I think it's a great learning experience so far. And carry on. Where did you move on from here, Tarun?
Yeah, so when you enter the temple, you firstly enter into Artha Mandapa, and when you see towards the roof, it is very intricate, and there are 9 segments which represent the 9 planets of how we know in our Hindu mythology.
Right.
So there was also an inscription at the Artha Mandapa. What I remember is this inscription was about which king made these temples and all. It was really interesting for me to know that it was written back then and we are touching it right now.
And I think temples were like such a monument where they used to go ahead, and apart from just a place of worship, it used to even be a place where they used to put in all the knowledge that they knew as well, with respect to the findings and with respect to how the society was back then, with respect to what creatures and what different mythological creatures, real world creatures, different scenarios of war and success and battle, and all of it used to be put up there. So it pretty much, I think it's like a big book.
Yeah, exactly. It's like reading a book.
Yeah, you just need to know the language of the book, and you can go back to the time and know about the phase and the time the temple was built in.
So there is also an interesting feature to the pillars of the temple.
Huh?
So there is a mythological character from Mahabharata, that is Kichaka. So that Kichaka is sculpted on the top of the pillar. So it is he was very strong. So it is supposed that the Kichaka is preventing the building and its strength.
Oh, okay. How does Kichaka, just describe, is it like a man that is there, or
it's like if you see in the national emblem, there are 4 lions around. So there's this pillar. So at the top of it, you will see the 4 faces.
Okay.
And the hands are holding the building.
Oh.
It's got that kind
wow.
of stuff.
Okay.
There are Kirti Mukhas. So the Kirti Mukhas are the face. It like demonish kind of face, and it is like in series all around the walls of the temple from at the lower side. So these Kirti Mukhas are supposed to prevent the temple or the structures from evil eye.
Okay.
I think Kirti Mukhas are something like what we also put up now, like in around
some houses have that, right?
That thing. Yeah, that is
nice.
Kirti Mukha. So coming back to the conventional things for most of the people, which is known to the most of the people, the sexual sculptures there. So all over the temple walls, whichever temple you visit, there are apsaras, surasundaris engage in various playful activities. You can see them plucking thorns from their leg in very, what can I say, erotic manner. Okay. And there is they looking at the mirror, admiring themselves, how beautiful they look. So it looks like that they are standing for you only to look at them and admire them since centuries.
Right, yeah, actually.
Because they are carved so intricately and beautifully, it looks like they're living. One of the standout features also of the walls, right? Beyond the sculptures of these other forms that you said, the sculptures of the Apsaras also stand out.
Yeah, there are like various Mithunas or couples giving like sexual inspirations. And the most interesting thing there was the tantric pose over there. Okay, it is the upside down position in which a male is. So it is believed that when you indulge into sexual activities, your body releases energy.
Right.
So when you are in the upside down position, the energy, the energy flows towards the brain and it is conserved.
So these tantric poses of the sexual activity is depicted on the walls of Kandaria Mahadev temple. You won't find it pretty much anywhere.
On any other temple. It's on the Kandaria Mahadev temple on the outside.
So talking about the Kandaria Mahadev temple, it represents Mount Meru. Mount Meru is a mythical mountain which is of religious importance also. So So there is the main shikhar in the center. Around the main shikhar, there are 84 shikharas, and they together looks converging. So it appears like that there is a mountain. So it is said that it is Mount Meru. It is an inspiration from Mount Meru, and it is built accordingly.
Okay.
So when you enter the temple, there is Garbhagriha. So Garbhagriha is where the deity is kept. So when the sun rises, because most of the temple are east facing, except the Chaturbhuja
Right.
in the southern group. So this sunlight, it looks magical. The way sunlight falls on the idol of the deity. Yeah, if you visit, you should once visit during the morning time, and you should see it, how the temple looks, the Garbhagriha looks during the morning time.
Actually, they have built it architecturally, like they have created a platform where, like, when the sun rises, the light falls on that platform, which reflects on the Garbhagriha.
Interesting. It's like they're playing with light to make
Yeah.
it beautiful. Yeah.
That is the reason that the enclosure gets closed at the evening and night, because there's no light. They don't use artificial light.
Right.
There's only natural light which reflects onto the Garbhagriha and the deity.
So the similar
Nice.
phenomena you can see in the Chaturbhuja temple, but it is at the time of sunset. So when you visit at the time of sunset in the Chaturbhuja temple, the similar phenomena you can see, because it is facing the west.
Right. This is the only one facing the west, you said.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So yeah, a lot of things they consider, not just in terms of architecture, but even scientifically, right? That's cool. So what did you do after this? Like, did you discover more things about the temples there?
So pretty much this sums up what we saw in the western group of temples.
Mhm.
We visited the nearby archaeological museum. To those who are not willing to hire a guide, I suggest they should visit here
Okay.
first, because they will know about the history also, and these small other Vyalas, the Kirti Mukhas, and their importance were written on the in the museum. So this is a museum, so it was very informative. So if somebody who plans that they should not hire a guide, so firstly visit the museum and then go to the temple.
Okay, I think that's some great advice, especially, given that the Western group of temples is the most important group of monuments there, right? Since most people will be visiting it anyway, a good advice would be to visit the museum first. That way you'll have some context, some background in case you're not availing the services of a guide. So brilliant. And how elaborate or how big is this museum, Tarun?
So this is a modern building. It is an archaeological museum. There are very few archaeological museums in India. Once I visited in Kerala, there was an archaeological museum in Kochi. So there are around 15-20 archaeological museums only, if I am not wrong. I don't remember exactly, but there are very few archaeological museums. Museum is very well maintained. They contain the actual figures and sculptures also, which are not which were broken or from the temples or the older temples.
Right. And how much time would one require to spend in the museum? Like, how much time would it take to go around?
I think 1 hour is sufficient. 1 to 2 hours is sufficient if you really want to know what they have told in the museum.
Okay, great. And as you said earlier, the same ticket could be used here as well, right? The one from the east and the western
complex.
complex.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So all of this was on day 2, right? This is when you explored all of the Western complex temples as well as the museum.
Yeah, all of this was on day 2. Yeah. In the evening, in the afternoon, we visited the eastern group and southern group also.
Okay.
We did all the temples on the second day and redid them on the third day also to have a more relaxed time. And
so we didn't we didn't want we also needed to capture photos,
right?
So we didn't take any photos on second day. We had decided that we'll do all of the photography part on the third day, so that we didn't want to miss something just because we were only indulged into clicking photos, or we always try to keep these two things on the different days.
Wow, that's good. That's
I think that's a great way of doing it, right? Yeah, that way you get the best of both worlds. It's not just the photos or just the stories, because a lot of times we have great photos, but what's a photo if you don't know the backstory of it? So I think it's a very good idea and a very good tactic. what else was there on day 3? What else was planned for day 3?
Firstly, would like to go back to the day 2 because we explored after lunch. We explored the eastern and the southern group of temples.
Okay.
The eastern group of temples, just like I mentioned, there was a Jain enclosure. So Jain enclosure has these temples which are not used for worshipping now, but there was a newer temple where the locals used to worship. So it was a closed complex. You can spend good half an hour there knowing about the Jain people. The regular ceremonies also happen there.
Okay.
Nice.
Eastern group of temples consist of Vamana temple and the Javari temple, and some smaller temples which are not in very good form, like Brahma temple also. So I think you can see that some sculptures which are not even there on the western group of temples, you can see on these temples also. Most of the people tend to miss on these temples because they have already explored a western group of temples, so they think that there is no need to go to these temples. But I highly recommend, if you are planning for longer days, you should visit. You can cycle around the village because they are scattered in the village. So I think cycling would be a great option. If you are with family, then you should hire your larger vehicle, kind of car or cabs, and
Right.
get there.
In terms of the sculptures on these temples, right, the eastern group of temples, Tarun, I know you said a lot of them were different from the temples on the western complex, but in terms of, say, the bolder or the more erotic structures, were they also present here on the eastern group, or was that limited to the western group of temples?
Yeah. It was also present on the eastern group of temples, except the Jain temples.
Okay.
The Vamana temple, the Javari temple also had the bold sculptures. Jain temple didn't have any bold sculptures on them.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting and a subtle difference to know.
Yeah. So this pretty much sums up about the eastern group of temples. So there are two villages nearby, Khajuraho and Jatkara. There is a river-like stream flowing between them. So it's nice to cycle around these villages, people indulging in various activities. That when we were crossing the river, people were bathing in it and doing their regular household chores. So it was very interesting to go around in cycle. So there was Dulha Dev temple. There is an interesting legend about the Dulha Dev temple, that there was a bride, there was a wedding happening in the past, and there was a bride, so and a groom. So when the groom was arriving with his family members in the barat, the horse fell him off, and he died. So the bride prayed to Dulha Dev temple, Dulha Dev Mahadev temple. So it is a Shiva temple. She prayed to the God, and God make him alive again. This is the legend which was told to us by the locals. It was pretty interesting to know that smaller stories associated with all these.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So I think this would be like a perfect temple for anybody who is
Getting married.
and even like wants to find a good bride or a groom for himself, like a spouse.
Yeah, I think they should. The locals said, because they assumed that we are a couple, they said you must pray in this temple. It will be helpful.
Yeah. Because I'm sure there are like certain temples that what I've heard of, which are particular, like for like a particular reason. If you go with that particular intention, your work or your
or to have like people go and pray to have a kid and stuff
exactly.
like that, right?
So it's like that.
Yeah, but it's an interesting story. So this is one of the southern temples, you said, right, Tarun?
Southern group of temples. This is Dulha Dev Mahadev temple.
Okay.
So when you cross the river stream and you go towards the more southern part, you can go to the Chaturbhuj temple, which I told, western facing temple. Okay, so this was our exploration for day 2.
Okay, brilliant. And looks like a lot of cycling and walking around also, because you've covered a lot of temples, right?
Places,
all the western, the southern, and the eastern. So
And the museum.
Yeah, and the museum as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of covering and good extensive storytelling experiences also during these temple visits. It's not just going and watching the temples and the sculpture and the architecture. So I think that's great. Now carry on and tell us what you had planned for the next day.
Actually, in evening, we also visited for the light and sound show. There is a light and sound show in Khajuraho. It happens in the western group of temples. So there is a separate entry for the light and sound show. It is narrated by Amitabh Bachchan.
Oh, wow.
So imagine listening to all these stories in his voice and the humongous temples.
That's amazing.
My God, yeah, that's a must do then.
It is available in Hindi and English, both languages. And the ticket was around 250 rupees, but it is worth it, I think.
Okay.
One should visit there.
Okay, I think that's also a great experience one can indulge in. And especially if you're visiting in the cooler months, right? It's perhaps like nice and cool also after sunset. So that way you can enjoy the sound and light show.
And one suggestion also, that if you plan to get a souvenir, you can buy the bamboo sari, which is local handicraft and made by the local people of Khajuraho and nearby villages. One can buy this bamboo sari. They use the straws of bamboo to make into the sari. Very smaller miniature statues of these Apsaras and Surasundaris are also available. You can buy also.
Okay, that's a nice point.
Yeah,
because a lot of time, I mean, you keep wondering, you want to take back a small part of it. So these souvenirs would be perfect to remember, like to remind you of your journey there.
So this pretty much ends our second day. Our third day, we are planning to visit the nearby Ranneha waterfalls. Ranneha is around 20 kilometers away from Khajuraho. And the waterfall is of Cane River. There is a river Cane flowing around the region, but that got cancelled because due to lesser rains in 2018, the waterfall was not formed.
So it was not at its full glory as was told to us by the people in Khajuraho. So we cancelled that plan.
So what did you plan instead for day 3 then?
So we revisited all these temples for photography and re-exploring them. Rest of the day we spent sitting around in Raja's cafe and discussing about how this trip was and planning our next trips. Where should we go?
Okay, so
Wonderful.
day 3 seems like a relaxed day, given that day 2 was quite hectic, right? You did a lot of exploring, a lot of seeing around, and then to top up all of that, you also had the sound and the light show in the evening. So a busy day. So this day, more like you're revising for the exam, right? That's how it was. It was going back to things you probably saw through the guide's eyes. This time you were seeing it through your own eyes, and then probably also discovering some little things that you might have missed out during the first iteration.
And planning for the future.
Planning for the future too. So you guys are all set. But what I also hear is that Jhansi and even Orcha, for that matter, right, are not too far away. I mean, obviously, if you're driving or something, you can drive there too. And if you're planning on doing like a elaborate road trip or a trip around Madhya Pradesh, those are something you can include in your itinerary as well.
So thank you so much, guys. You have apart from just telling the story and telling us about the entire place, I feel you all gave really amazing travel tidbits also.
The experience listening to it was even greater because we are listening from listeners this time. So thank you so much for being our listeners to Tarun and Pournima. We look forward to your blog coming up and your future travels. All the best, and thank you so much for being a part of the Musafir Stories.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Saif. Thank you, Faiza.
That was yet another great episode of the Musafir Stories. If you guys like the show, please subscribe to us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Audioboom, Savan, Pocket Casts, Castbox, Stitcher, or any other podcasting app available on iOS or Android. Please do leave us a review on iTunes. It goes a long way in the show's discoverability. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We go by the handle The Musafir Stories. Or, if it suits you, you could email us at themusafirstories@gmail.com or visit our website at www.themusafirstories.com for more information. All of these links will be made available in the show notes section of each episode. So here's to more traveling, sharing, and inspiring. Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, happy travels and goodbye.